Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players Podcast. This is our show for Monday, July 27th. Hello to you out there, whether you're listening to us wherever you get your pods or checking in on the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Peter Thomas Fornatale back with you on the East Coast after a month in California, but here back at my mom's house on Long Island, not far from the location of the new Belmont Park. And we bring in a man coming to us from the planet Texas. No, not the one you might be thinking of. He's up in Saratoga, but this is our other most frequent guest on these airwaves. Always a pleasure to catch up and talk racing with Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Going great. Thick of the summer now, so very much looking forward to the remainder of the Del Mar and Saratoga meets and all that comes with it.
I feel like it's a little bit of rubber meets the road. Not that the Saratoga meet hasn't been great. Not that it hasn't been great to have Del Mar back. But when the calendar gets ready to turn to August, I feel like the competition gets ratcheted up that much more. We got a lot of exciting races coming up in the next few weeks. Going to have a ton of coverage here on the network. Is there a race in particular this summer, Nick, that you're looking forward to, whether it's at the Spa or out in Del Mar?
I mean, the easy call is the Whitney at this point, with who's pointing to it and how much clarity it'll give the handicap division. It really should be something spectacular. You know, I know we're getting Sovereignty Baeza, Magnitude, and White Barrio, and I'm probably leaving somebody out who's of influence. I know Phileas Fogg was mentioned last week as a possibility. I'm not sure how many more they're going to get in the gate than that, but they really don't need many more than that. And now with Phileas Fogg being in there, it ensures a pretty decent early gallop. Probably gives Magnitude a good test relative to what he'll face in the Breeders' Cup, with maybe having to be in a scenario where he has a target. So I'm looking forward to that eagerly. And, you know, obviously with Golden Tempo back on the work tab at Saratoga, he's been on the work tab for a few weeks, but made his first work at Saratoga over the weekend. So the Travers later in the month should be really good. But I mean, we're going to have a major race every weekend from this coming Saturday all the way to the end of the month, with the Arlington Million and the Jim Dandy Saturday. Both look like really good races. Jim Dandy has a small field, but it looks very intriguing. The Million looks outstanding. So yeah, a lot to look forward to.
You remind me, I've got my deadline. My tomorrow morning deadline is to do my horse-by-horse write-up of the Arlington Million for our friends at theraces.com. Folks who check out the inthemoneypodcast.com website will see a link to that there as well. I only did a first glance through it. Looked good. Last week, Matt Bernier and I, as part of our Friday coverage for our ITM Horse Player Tour, and that will be back in effect this week. We'll be doing that show again. We had a very long conversation about journalism, and we were talking about what to do next, and we missed what's going to happen next, which is he's going off the stud. Sounds like there was a little bit of an injury sustained in the last race. I think also some of the issues that we were talking about on the show in terms of the uncertainty of his ability to be able to knock heads with the best of his division at this point may have come into play. Who knows? But I didn't get a chance to get your take on journalism's last race and just reflect on his career in general. Because for me, one of the coolest horses in training of the last several years, even if he often did find one faster.
Yep, I think that's a great way to describe it. He was an admirable horse. I love the way they campaigned him, and I wish that we could get more horses campaigned like that. I wish he had been better this year, that he had improved a little bit more. But, you know, his best was good among what we've seen in the last 10 years or so. And I don't blame them. Probably, you know, you run into this sort of nebulous conversation of how much are you hurting a horse's value by sending them out there and having them lose with some regularity. And it just looked like he really didn't fit this handicap division the way we would have hoped. So I don't blame him for making the decision. Obviously, the injury was nothing serious, nothing that would prevent him from having a good stud career. He'll be a really interesting stallion prospect. I think they probably need to find some speedy mares early on, but he wasn't a horse that was completely ineffective at 2. He was obviously better as the distances started getting longer. So I could see him making a really interesting stallion. And obviously, you know, there needs to be an ultimate successor to a horse like Curlin. I'm not saying he's going to be that, but he could definitely be a horse that produces a lot of long-winded distance types for sure.
Yeah, one of my favorites, and sad we won't be getting to see him on the racetrack, but excited to see what he'll do in his next career. What made me actually think to bring up journalism was when you mentioned sovereignty as a possibility. You and I had the lengthy let's define overrated conversation when he came up last. How are you feeling heading into this Whitney? Are you thinking this is a test he might have trouble passing, given some of the speed figures and quality older runners who are going to be in here? Or have you discovered any new reasons for optimism? Or like me, are you taking a wait and see approach?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I almost wonder if this has the potential to be his last race, right? It's he needs to win. He needs to prove that he moved forward now as a 4-year-old, and his 2 starts this year have just been okay. They've not been what was expected, but again, you come back to that notion that you can still be really good and be overrated at the same time. They are clearly not mutually exclusive. And Sovereignty is a horse that was overrated last year. He was overrated coming into this year, and he hasn't delivered yet. So I think the odds will be very interesting. I would assume Magnitude will be favored, even though Sovereignty's been such a popular horse because of what Magnitude's done this year, and deservedly so. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be Nitrogen is who I forgot as far as the Whitney goes.
Right. Of course.
Horse,
I should have helped you out there.
Yeah, I knew there was a big one I was leaving out, but that just adds so much intrigue to the mix as well. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. A week from now, we'll be already diving into the PPs for the Whitney.
We've got Breeders' Cup implications for multiple divisions. Let's take a minute and look back, Nick, at some Breeders' Cup Sprint implications from last weekend. We had one race on each coast. We'll start out with the Grade 1 Bing Crosby winning your in action for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Listen Up Chance gets the job done in this one, scores a solid 104 Beyer speed figure, a number that was equaled by Maximum Bourbon, who did show that he can class up at the graded level after those big speed figures against restricted listed company prior to that. Give me your thoughts on the Bing Crosby, and let me know what you think the ceiling for runners like Listen Up Chance and Midnight Bourbon might be.
Yeah, it was a good day for the overnight St. Matthew's Stakes from Derby Week. That you wouldn't necessarily be saying that during Saratoga, but we'll touch on 2 different horses from there, one of which was Maximum Bourbon. But as far as Listen Up Chance goes, I mean, this was a well-deserved victory after a huge effort in the True North on the Belmont undercard, a day where I bet him. Could have really used him second, could have really used him winning. And he was a horse that just was interesting that day because he was going to be a big price. He was working well coming in, and I didn't really trust the 2 favorites. But he really delivered here. Doug O'Neill's off to a nice start at the meet. And, this feels like a classic Doug O'Neill kind of horse, one that's just getting better as time goes by. He's quick. His game will travel, which we know based on the way he ran at Saratoga. And this was a solid performance, a really good effort from just off of it. Good effort as well from Maximum Bourbon, who had shown some real potential. He's moved forward substantially in his last few starts. Been campaigned a little gingerly. This was his first go since early May, but I think we'll see him hopefully at least once more before the Breeders' Cup. Twice would be nice, but I don't know if they'll push it quite that much. And I would imagine he'll be a significant Breeders' Cup Sprint player as well. So love the effort of the first 2. I was on Stronghold, who didn't run particularly well and probably isn't quite grade 1 caliber at 6 furlongs, but might have some objectives out there a little bit lesser, going 7 to 8 furlongs.
Thank you for picking me up on the name. I said it right the first time, Maximum Bourbon, but then I did one of the other M bourbons and got myself confused. Will be interesting to see what those horses do. And I will say, more than other divisions with sprinters, tell me if I'm right or wrong here, I'm a little more forgiving of those layoff lines. It just feels like in the history of the Breeders' Cup Sprint, you see horses coming off layoffs or who need breaks. It seems to be almost more about being able to deliver that fastest effort on the right day than it is putting together like a full-on body of work.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that. And, look, this time last year, the eventual Breeders' Cup Sprint winner hadn't run in 2025. So, or he hadn't run in 2025. So, right. I mean, you can be there with a little bit less activity. I think one of the overlooked races from Haskell weekend was the Jersey bred race that Bookham Dano ran in, and admittedly didn't look that great. Very workmanlike. Bookham Dano's not a flashy horse, and hopefully we see him resurface in a race like the Forgo and gets tested against grade 1 company again. But this sprint division looks like it's coming together a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about another contender that won on the opposite coast.
That's what they call a segue in the business, folks. We will head out to California. Head back from California to the East Coast. Just being in California has clearly messed up my compass here a bit. Built was a heavy favorite heading into the Vanderbilt, 6-5. Actually, not even as heavy a favorite as I would have thought. I think in the end, really delivered though with a on the lead performance from Irad Ortiz. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. It's a 105 Beyer speed figure. Not the career best, but certainly a career best performance when you consider the quality of the company. How good is built for our friends at Eclipse?
Yeah, it was a career best non-Lasix, which I think is important to note. I felt like he was a horse that maybe wasn't quite as good without Lasix, but just a really good training job by Wayne Catalano, a veteran trainer who's outstanding and probably a guy that would be much more highly regarded if he had some of the stock that his peers do. And I thought this was just a really, really strong effort. Sat outside Damon's Mound, was always comfortable. Irad can make the difficult look easy, and he did that, just waiting and then letting him run when the running started. And I thought he took him's best shot and just completely repelled him down the stretch. So really good run, and Built looks like a horse that I would imagine we'd see maybe in the Phoenix, perhaps in the Forgo along the way there. But Catalano with another really nice sprinter. Aloha West comes to mind a little bit, and Built's better than Aloha West. Aloha West ended up winning the Breeders' Cup back in 2021, so all signs point to this horse being a real contender. There were a couple of scratches out of there. Greg Sacco scratched both of his horses, but it didn't matter. Built was going to win that race regardless of who lined up, and I think you could safely say at this point, and I guess I could ruffle some of the Bookham Dano fans' feathers, and I'm a Bookham Dano fan, but Built is the class of the East Coast at this point, sprint-wise, but would love to see the two of them square off in the Forgo on August 29th.
Oh, that would be fascinating should it come to be. Both him and Built as rising 4-year-olds, or not rising 4-year-olds, but 4-year-olds as well. You look at sort of the figure patterns of both of them, and I think you can make a case that both of them will have their best race to come. It sounds like you're in agreement on that idea.
You would think so, yeah. Built is a horse that has clearly gotten better at 4. Bookham Dano's been around long enough now to be 5, but he's a horse that just continues to deliver over and over, and looks like we know what his best races look like, and they're certainly good enough. And, really the entirety of his career has been built around this Breeders' Cup, because they skipped going out west last year to not have him travel with an eye on 2026. So, they're putting a lot of chips in the middle on the Breeders' Cup Sprint of 2026.
Be fascinating to see how it plays out. Mentioned earlier that Friday is the ITM Horse Players Tour. Go to horseplayers.com. You put up $20, and you've got multiple ways to win a $10,000 Breeders' Cup betting challenge seat. Nick, we've been talking a lot on the show so far about the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Give me your overview of what we learned this past weekend about the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
I think that it's a pretty contentious group of horses at this point, and it looks like a very competitive race. Again, it's a division that usually comes together more so in the latter part of the year, but we're seeing consistent good performances by solid horses like Built, and now 2 really good races in a row from Listen Up Chance. So I think we're noticing that this division is getting stronger by the day. And, we're talking about older horses, Pete, but you have to mention Englishman, who's a 3-year-old that obviously is destined for a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint. You would hope we'll see him again in the H. Allen Jerkins later on in August. So this division is coming together quite nicely, and looks like it's really going to end up being one of the more fascinating races of the weekend.
We'll see how it all plays out throughout the season, and we'll have loads of coverage for you in the Money Players podcast and the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Nick, let's move on to another story that I alluded to. Irad Ortiz, he comes up on every show we do. I love what you said before about his talent or his penchant for making the hard look easy. What was it, a 6-winner day he had over the weekend? Just want you to give me some perspective on how good he is. And is he sort of resumed? Is he now number 1 with a bullet on the list of top riders in the country? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. It's amazing that he and his brother win as much as they do when they share an agent, right? It's like, the Steve Rushing has a lock on just about every barn, but Irad delivers over and over. And one of the things that they've done now in the last year or so is diversify his portfolio, if you will, of clients. And one of his new clients is Brad Cox, who a long-term relationship with Brad is probably going to give Irad his best opportunity at a Derby. I know he missed very narrowly this year, but Brad is a guy who's going to be around for a long, long time. And Todd Pletcher, with all due respect, is not going to be around terribly much longer. So it's been very fun to see Irad ride. He's obviously just routinely good. He's good on both surfaces. He's good long, short. has the ability to get horses to switch off and still finish, which I think shows real talent, and then has the ability to dictate terms very fluidly, like he did in the Coaching Club American Oaks on Counting Stars, a horse that he's now 2 for 2 aboard, and looks like he's unlocked her a little bit as well as she had run before. She's been just a little bit better with him in her last couple of starts, and I think that's important to at least note because he probably had something to do with that. And in the Coaching Club American Oaks, he sort of pulled one of the old school veteran moves that you'll see, and he did it to his brother and kind of suckered Jose into coming through on the inside, only to tell him, yeah, no, this isn't going to happen, and slam the door with a really aggressive final 3/16 or so, where Counting Stars pulled clear again. I think there's a little bit of track profile at play there. I don't think it was the best place to be down the stretch right on the rail, but still, I mean, he always had his brother's measure there. And just a really outstanding performance from Counting Stars, and a great day for Irad, who was also aboard Winstock, who won a key 2 other than earlier on in the card that featured Emerging Market as a heavy favorite. But yeah, Irad delivered all day long, including in both graded stakes.
Let's talk about Counting Stars for another minute. It's 100 Beyer speed figure for her. You talked about the tactics in the race and how they might have played out to her advantage. She ended up winning by, what was it, just over 4 lengths. It does seem hard to make a case that the riding tactics were the difference as much as something that happened during the way, or are you not willing to see that yet? Do you think there's a world in which Always a Runner could eventually reverse form? Of course she could, but do you think it's likely she could reverse form against Counting Stars at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the separation between the two of them is that big. I think Counting Stars is better than her right now. I think Counting Stars has a clear advantage in some of these smaller field cat and mouse type races, whereas Always a Runner is probably going to be better in a bigger field with a pace where she can sit back and make one run. I mean, she is just not a horse that's going to produce a 3 furlong bid, which is what she's needed to do in each of her last 2 starts. So, looking down the road to a race like the Breeders' Cup Distaff, where there's likely to be a real pace in front of her in a big field, is Always a Runner at a clear disadvantage to Counting Stars. In that kind of scenario, not really. So I could see things reversing a little bit. This division remains in many ways in flux because of what we'll see moving forward with Nitrogen. Nitrogen is supposed to go back to running against fillies after the try in the Whitney. Speaking of trying males, and I'm generally the one that sort of scoffs at the idea of doing so. I heard a whisper out of Mark Cassie's mouth about trying the Travers with Counting Stars, and if there was a year to do it, this is it. Kenny McPeak did it 2 years ago with Torpedo Anna, who looked like she really towered over her competition at this point, more so in a more significant way than Counting Stars does up to this stage. But the 3-year-olds that year were really good, and the 3-year-olds this year, I mean, with all due respect, they're not really good. They're solid, but they're not running fast numbers. The other thing is they're all closers, right? That's why Chip Honcho is going to be a really major player in the Jim Dandy. So, I think the connection should probably wait out the Jim Dandy, see how that goes, and see if maybe they want to try her. If they're going to go 1.25 miles, why not try it in a race like the Travers? But I won't blame them for going to the Alabama. The Alabama is an important and historic race. The other thing that I think might be at play is if she wins the Alabama, the Eclipse is probably done as far as the conversation goes, unless you see a horse like Always a Runner win the Distaff. And, Mark Cassie can probably tell the ownership of Counting Stars, I don't really think we're going to lose the Distaff with Nitrogen down the line. So bit of an interesting thing. I mean, I would at least be considering it because if we've seen nothing but 3-year-olds running 96 to 98 Beyer speed figures, and I had Counting Stars in the form that she's in, who loves Saratoga as much as she does, I'd be tempted.
Yeah, she ran faster. She's in good form. It's a course she loves. I hadn't heard that whisper, but as you're making the case, I'm fascinated, and it'll be interesting to see. Not a barn that is afraid to take shots. Also, another reason why that just might happen. Let's move on to a couple other races here, Nick. I want to keep you somewhere within the time frame I promised you, but there's a few other things we have to talk about. When you talk about the coolest horses in training, I wouldn't argue at this point somebody saying the coolest horse in training. This is a one-horse conversation. What about Gold Phoenix going out there and winning the Eddie Reed at Del Mar? I mean, we know he loves it. We know he loves it around there, and we know that the success he's had is basically unprecedented, I think, at least in terms of modern racing. It's a 98 Beyer speed figure. He wins by a nose, a solid price too at 9-2. Was this a surprise to you? And what do you think about Gold Phoenix and the Eddie Reed?
Yeah, I mean, two of the biggest Del Mar lovers ever. He and Formidable Man squared off, and it was a narrow margin between first and third. Obviously, with Gold Phoenix getting up by a nose, as you just mentioned. Uh, Definitely one of the coolest horses around. Sets him up well for what would be, I think, his 17th win in the Del Mar Handicap on Pacific Classic Day. And I wouldn't have previously thought that a mile and an eighth was within his scope, but hats off to Phil D'Amato for getting him ready. Phil's barn is off to an outstanding start at the meet, and in the year of Chuck Simon, it would only be of Chuck Simon disciples doing well. It would only be fitting for Phil D'Amato to win a Breeders' Cup race this year with Chad Summers and Cherie DeVoe dominating the Triple Crown. So very happy for the connections. Obviously, we're all friends with the folks at Little Red Feather, and this is a horse that has just delivered over and over and over. And it seems like he's money in the bank at Del Mar every summer. So it was a pretty riveting rendition of it for sure. And Formidable Man will be better when they get back to a mile. Mile and an eighth probably pushes the outer limits for him distance-wise. But hard not to really appreciate Gold Phoenix.
Props to Gary Fenton, too, who gave us the sort of up-to-the-minute account when we did our little stable tour opening weekend preview. And I was actually, part of the reason I was surprised at the prices, because if that were the vibes, usually when the vibes around the barn are that good, that does translate to the market in one way or another. But if you believed and you listened to Gary, you got a really nice price on that one. And it would just be the fifth. It would only be the fifth Del Mar handicap in a row for Gold Phoenix if he can get it done. But if anybody could win 17, it would be him. What else should we talk about from the weekend? We had another nice figure up in Saratoga.
Yeah, Maida looked really good in the honorable miss and threw her hat into the ring, I would say, as far as the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint goes long term. Just a classic case of speed kills, Pete. She's a fast horse, set the pace, really dueled Grand Job into the ground. And Grand Job is a filly that we've seen run extremely well on a number of occasions, earned some really gaudy speed figures. Obviously didn't perform at the level we'd grown accustomed to her seeing. But, Maida gets in the mix for the ballerina, which I'd love to see. Then, we could see an eklatant Maida ways and means showdown, maybe give Grand Job another try there. That shapes up as a really interesting race as well for Travers Day, which seems like a theme we're touching on here. All these good horses slated to potentially run on Travers Day. But I thought that was a really compelling performance, no doubt about it.
There's great racing all summer at a number of places, but there's also no doubt that Travers card does shape up to be a little bit of a Breeders' Cup, very early Breeders' Cup preview day, as the penultimate prep, and sometimes the final prep for some of these horses. Obviously, we'll have that covered for you on lock. Saratoga, Nick and I are actually going to work together on the In the Money Plus side to give you the extra coverage there. If you go to inthemoneypodcast.com/plus, you can check that out. Now that I'm back on the Eastern Seaboard, going to also be hopefully as part of our ITM Inner Circle, putting a few more plays together. We took a swing at one of the Del Mar carryovers, but we'll be doing much more of that for both Saratoga and Del Mar. Check out our our bet share isn't open right now, but we do extra shows on Saturdays for our Inner Circle crew. Go to inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. Check out all the various levels we have available. And if nothing else, you got a chance to get great extra coverage from Adam out at Del Mar and up here at Saratoga. All right, that's the rundown, Nick. We've covered everything that I meant to talk about for sure. Is there anything else on your mind you want to get off your chest? Grievances, petty complaints, props, whatever direction you want to take it.
Me grievances? No way. No, very excited about the racing continuing, and the card at Colonial on Saturday is incredible. I'll be there for Twin Spires. Looking forward to that for sure. And another big weekend as well with the Jim Dandy on tap at Saratoga. So now we're in the thick of it now. Grade 1 action at Del Mar as well, and the Clement Hirsch, and all those cards are out. So we got a lot of studying to do.
I know. That's the good thing with these early draws. That's what comes up next. Glad you mentioned Twin Spires. We are going to be working with them to promote that Colonial Arlington Million Day contest. Go to twinspires.com, click on the tournaments tab. I think I'm going to grab JK later in the week for that one. Obviously, Nick, if you're around, it'd be fun to get you too, because it's always a good and competitive card out there. We'll leave it here for now, but tune in every day. We're going to have coverage of something going on in the racing world. Oh, for those of you out there who are, concerned that we didn't talk about the European winning your rain qualifiers, especially with that race of the year so far in the King George, don't worry. I'll be back doing something on that, maybe with Adam Mills. Maybe I'll bother Michael A. Adolphson there and get something on that. So that'll be up on the channel soon. But loads of coverage. Make sure you subscribe. Drop us a comment too. Let us know what was your best performance of the weekend. For Nick Tammaro, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Thank you so much to our sponsors at 10 Strike Racing. You know we love to root for the purple and black, and also our charity partners, Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga, inthemoneypodcast.com/horses to learn more about them and the work they do and the big benefit they have coming up in Saratoga. Hopefully I'm going to be up there for that. Till the next time, may you win all your photos.